Hi there, this is Danielle from Rough Drafts. If you like our content, please consider giving us a follow. You can listen and watch on Spotify and YouTube. You can listen on Apple. And over on our Patreon, you can see full content, videos, case studies, and much, much more. Go on, click the button to follow along. Today, I get to speak to the incredibly talented Hazel Coonagh, who is a visual artist specialising in photography and textile. What struck me most in this conversation is how naturally the slowness makes sense. Hazel describes how her work moved from the quick, screen-based cycle of digital photography to the deliberate, meticulous act of needle and thread through paper, and how that shift changed not just the process, but the depth of connection to the work. She can look back at a piece and remember what she was listening to while she made it. Now that is a different kind of making. We talk about her process, how that changed over time, and on seeing her work projected onto the Wellington Monument. There's an honest thread throughout about what it actually means to be a visual artist in Ireland, the funding applications, the rejections, learning how to write about your work, the slow, unglamorous work of building a practice outside a commercial framework, and her take on self-promotion on platforms like Instagram. I hope you enjoyed this episode just as much as I did. Today's guest, Hazel Coonagh, is a photographer and visual artist whose work begins with a portrait, taken in the usual way, a person in front of a lens, and then she transforms it and manipulates it into something surreal, something dreamlike, something layered. The finished piece can look nothing like the photograph it came from. The person might still be there, or they might be something else entirely. She pulled from Japanese art and surrealism, pop culture and the natural world, and it's filtered through a unique sensibility that is definitely Hazel's. And it's kind of hard to describe it in other terms. During lockdown, Hazel made a work called Elements, and it combined photography with hand embroidery. And she described the stitching as something she could get lost in, a welcome distraction, the slow, repetitive physical act of needle and thread alongside the digital manipulation of a photographic image. Her work has been shown at Crawford Gallery, Outpost Gallery, RTÉ Illuminations Art Project, and across social campaigns and exhibitions throughout Dublin and Ireland. We're going to delve into her process, and I want to ask Hazel today, really, at what point does a photograph stop being a photograph? Most photography starts and ends with a camera, but hers certainly doesn't. I've been a long-time fan and a recent enough lucky owner of one of her original pieces, which several viewers of the podcast have asked me about, which is in the background here. Welcome, Hazel.
Thank you for having me. That was a very kind intro. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. So maybe you might start at the beginning, at the beginning of your career. What led you into visual communications?
Absolutely. So I suppose if we go far enough back to when I was a kid, that's when I got into photography first. So growing up in the 90s, pretty much every family had a little point and shoot film camera. It'd be used for, birthdays, Christmases, holidays, that kind of thing. My family was no different, and like a lot of other families, we'd get the film developed and then store them in photo albums, and that became stacks and stacks and stacks of photos, which I absolutely loved. Just something about not understanding the science behind it at that age. As a kid, taking a picture of your mom or dad and then having the physical image in front of you on a piece of paper. There's something really magical about that. So that's what first really, really enticed me and brought me into photography. So I started kind of stealing the family camera and taking it along to hanging out with my friends and stuff like that when I was really, really young. And then when I was about 8 or 9, myself and my dad, we were coming out of my grandfather's house, and the neighbours were having a sale of work, and they invited us in, or rather we invited ourselves in, and I found it was one of these really kind of thin, long kind of cameras. They used to have a little kind of case that flipped over, and it was maybe like £1 or something like that. So I asked if I could have it, and my dad said yes, and then that was kind of really the beginning of it all. So I used it more so like a toy at that time, but it was great to have it from such an early age because I think it just ingrained a lot of the principles of photography within me then without me realizing it, like just how to frame a picture nicely without chopping people's heads off. You know, something really basic like that I was able to just kind of get from an early enough age. So that stayed with me. I really liked it because I always liked art as a kid, but I wasn't an amazing drawer or painter. You know, there are always people in my class, say, that were a bit better than me. Um, and I kind of thought I'd love to be an artist in some way, but I at that age, you just think that art is drawing and painting. You don't realize that there are other ways it can go. Once I realized photography could be an art form, I thought, oh, that's brilliant. I can do that. So I stuck with it. At about 17, an art teacher of mine, Mr. Byrne, showed me how to use a manual film camera and showed me how to, you know, load the film, develop it, all that jazz. And then a year later, I think I got my first manual SLR camera. So that was still film at the time. Photography's just been with me for a very long time. It's just sort of always been there. And I think by the time I got to college, when I was, I think, was I what, probably 20 when I went into college, I went and studied visual communications for it was DIT at the time, TU Dublin now. Photography was involved in that course, which really suited me. But of course, there were lots of other elements involved. You know, you had computer graphics, typography, drawing, everything. And I think that was just a good place for me to be, in that I could take photography as I knew it and start introducing it to all these other kinds of mediums. And I think that's really what made me go in different directions with the medium and what led me to where I am now.
It's incredible, that you saw, the photography as maybe just something that you did. It's not necessarily an art form, perhaps. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
it's quite democratic when you think about it. Like, every house did have a camera of some sort, and they
Yeah,
had the photo
absolutely.
albums, and it feels like the probably one of the most accessible forms of art for a lot of people and for kids, and I remember some of those old cameras. They're beautiful just as objects, just as objects alone. Um, and then then bringing that love into visual communications and seeing how it could be kind of applied in different contexts with typography, image making, and all those different aspects. That really kind of, I suppose, brought together the love of that art form and then a way of applying it in a really modern context. Were you ever considering going directly into a photography course?
Yeah, I applied to them, but I just didn't get into any of them. Which I remember at the time thinking, because I'd sort of been doing photography for quite a while, I was pretty confident with the photography courses I applied to. I was like, yeah, I'll probably get into them because I've been doing this a while now, and I kind of know how to use a camera and I've experience with it and everything else, even though I'm still fairly young. But I didn't get into any of them, and just the way it goes, you know. So I did get into graphic design, and I thought, well, I have to do something. And I thought
But I think that
I thought,
go on.
well, graphic design I thought was sort of a good option anyway, because again, my art teacher who taught me how to use the film camera in secondary school when I was 17, he kind of said, well, you don't necessarily want to go into something too specific too early as well. Like he said, if you go into something like design, you're still going to be able to practice photography, but you'll learn a bunch of other skills. And he saw through teaching me an art that I did have interests that lay in, like, in drawing and sculpture, other areas as well. Now, like I said, when I was younger, I wasn't as confident in those skills, but you can build them up as you get older. And I think when you get a bit older, you realize, skills are things you can learn. It's not something you're born with. I think when you're younger, you don't really realize that. You just think the people who are really good at drawing in your class, they've just always been really good and they're just good. And some people are not good, and that's the way it is. And then when you get a bit older, you realize that's not actually true and you can learn these things. And I think even with drawing, I did improve at drawing when I needed to, and surprised myself as well. But what really changed for me in graphic design was my introduction to Photoshop. And figuring out how to manipulate images and transform them and add effects and things like that. And that really, really blew my mind. And that's really what started to direct my work into different places.
I know from looking at some of your work, it's quite editorial. And I think they're probably the study of graphic design has definitely informed that as well.
Yeah,
You
I'm
can
sure.
really see how the work would articulate an article, a story, a front cover. It really does kind of speak to that, and it kind of borrows from that kind of editorial world. Um, where are you looking for like, kind of inspiration or, I mentioned at the beginning, like this kind of surrealist pop art, all these kind of styles and movements. Is there anything that you were kind of interested in before you kind of arrived at the type of work you're doing now?
Yeah, there's just so much really. I mean, cinematography and film, that's a massive one. Obviously that's a very broad statement. There's kind of so many. Um, as well as that, you mentioned Japanese artists. Traditional Japanese art has just always kind of spoken to me. Something about the lines and at times the simplicity and the kind of quiet nature of some of it, what still having a really um, kind of specific execution to it. It's just sort of it looks so effortless, but it's so not. It's anyone who tries to maybe replicate it can find it so difficult. But it's just got such a balance to it. I think the balance is really what I appreciate about it most, and that's something that I try to implement in my own work. Is just the balance of elements, if nothing else. Compositionally. Um, Other than that, I mean, yeah, surrealism was definitely a big one when I started to get into studying art myself as a teenager and getting into knowing a little bit more about the art world. Definitely the likes of Dali and Magritte and people like that definitely caught my attention because their work was just so different. Um, and I just, it intrigues you when something is a bit more unusual, I suppose. So that's what led me down that path as well, I think. And then a lot of that just stayed with me. I think when I'm making work myself, I'm usually trying to not play it too safe. Um, I like to try and push the boundaries and surprise myself as far as what I'm capable of doing as well. Um, but as far as other inspirations, God, you could kind of list them on and on and on. I'll probably think of 10 really good ones at the end of this interview.
But that style that is uniquely yours, because you can spot your work a mile away now. Like, at what point did you start to kind of hone that? Because obviously, probably if you look back at your portfolio, it's most likely very different from years ago. And over time, while you had those sensibilities and that kind of the proportions, the scale, the quietness, the structure, the precision of those influences, the style that you are maybe known for, if you don't mind me saying that, but that kind of that surrealist, the use of embroidery. At what point did you just kind of go, aha, and start kind of going towards that as a kind of a unique, I suppose, a unique output?
Do you mean specifically the introduction of textiles?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So how that came about was a little bit by chance in a way. So it was just before the lockdown hit in 2020, and at that point, a lot of the work that I had done for a couple of years now had been basically on a screen. So you take a digital photograph with a digital camera, upload it to a screen. I would play around with it in Photoshop, probably upload it to Instagram, and that would be kind of its life cycle. Um, and after a while, I really began to miss that tactile nature of film photography and drawing and just making things by hand a little bit more. So I think I was sort of in need of something like that. So I bought a printer and I started printing work and kind of messing around with it. I started putting safety pins through portraits or adding watercolors, mixing mediums to, again, just try to push photography into a different place. Anyway, start of 2020, I'd gotten a gig with doing it was basically just a retouching job for a band through an agency. and they liked what I'd done. And then they came back and said, "Oh, we'd actually love you to basically remix some of their album artwork or their single artwork because they were re-releasing the single as a remix. So they wanted you to remix the artwork." And it was one of the band members actually that said, "Oh, I really like this style that I've seen online of people stitching through photographs. Would you be able to do something like that?" I'd never picked up a needle and thread and done embroidery in my life. But of course, what you do in this business is you say, "Yeah, I can do that, no problem. Absolutely, I do it all the time." And then you just figure it out, you know. So I thought, right, how hard can it be? Turns out it was pretty tricky, especially the first time doing it. But you know, trial and error, you can figure these things out. There's so much information online. Learning art in any kind of medium has never been more accessible than it is now. So really, there's kind of no excuse, given how many sort of YouTube tutorials there are and everything else, how much software there is to download, all that. Anyway, did that first piece for the band. They were happy with it. And I just found that I really enjoyed doing it. So I just kept doing it. So the first piece that I did, that was, you know, my own self-directed piece. I had taken a self-portrait and I printed it out on some nice A4 Fabriano paper in black and white. I just got all the most colourful embroidery flosses that I could find and just did a kind of kaleidoscopic floral kind of arrangement. Um, at that point, to me, embroidery was flowers and stuff. That's kind of just how that was my association with it. So that's what I did. Um, I did kind of start to make it my own a little bit through my Japanese influences and through Art Nouveau influences as well. That's another big influence on my earlier kind of embroidery work is Art Nouveau and those curves and lines, you know, which they're also very influenced by Japanese artwork anyway. But yeah, after a while, I just sort of decided that it was an interesting enough kind of place to find myself that I hadn't expected, that I was willing to continue to explore it further and sort of dedicate my practice to it, which was a big step. It was a big change. It's very different to the type of work I had been doing in its process.
Mhm.
And given the amount of time that's involved in stitching through paper or canvas or whatever it might be, I did some through wood as well. Suddenly, the very quick kind of nature of making the image that I was making through digital softwares kind of just got slowed right down to, you know, very meticulous needle and thread. It's a completely different kind of approach. And I really liked how different it was.
Mhm.
And loved the results. I just thought there's just so much you can do with this. And I really appreciated getting to work with needle and thread. There was something about it, even though I hadn't done embroidery before. I'd done a little bit of like hand sewing and things like that when I was younger. So I don't know if it was that, but something about using a needle and thread just felt really comfortable and really natural, kind of from the get go. And I remember saying it to my mother when I started to use the embroidery kind of techniques. She was like, "Oh, well, I did embroidery and your aunt did embroidery and your mother did embroidery, my mother did embroidery and your aunt and everybody else." And she was like, "It's in your blood, you know, it's been passed, this inherited kind of skill that you just have." So maybe there's something to that, you know, there's, who knows? But anyway, it just felt kind of inerrant. And I just kept doing it. Yeah. I just kept doing it and just decided this is an interesting kind of thing to explore. It's an underutilized kind of female centric medium that has been
Mhm.
undervalued for years.
Yeah.
And I felt it's time to kind of bring it out of the craft world and into fine art.
So that slow process, you really enjoy the slow nature and slowing things right down with your work and the needle and thread. Does that give you time to think differently about the work, or does it just give you time to think in general?
I suppose a bit of both. It definitely gives you time to think about the work more. I think going into once the way the kind of process usually works is I will have an idea in mind, I'll sketch it out or a few different iterations of it. Then I will shoot it with again in a few different variations because you know you need to give yourself plenty of options. That's how I like to work. Um, unless you have something just really, really specific in mind. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But anyway, you get the images onto the computer, and that's when I start to work out the templates and things like that of where the stitching is going to go. So I've been toying with just how much I'm kind of including in sort of digitizing the templates for print. Because sometimes I've found early on, if I put in too much of a guideline, basically, sometimes that can get in the way. So when you start to stitch, you maybe will naturally want to veer in a different direction, and but you can't because basically the templates are there to be covered. Because if you don't cover them up, then they show, and you don't want the templates to show. That's sort of 101 embroidery. So I've been trying to experiment with doing as minimal as possible templates when I can, um, so that you do have kind of a bit more freedom when you're doing things by hand. But certainly when you get to that process, it's and in some cases it depends on how much surface you need to cover. Basically, like the piece that you have behind you there, that took quite a while
Mm-hmm.
because you've kind of it's. I mean, I say it's a large piece, and in stitching terms, it's a slightly large piece, say medium piece. Um, and there's quite a few pieces that had to be covered. So yes, that can take time, whereas sometimes you might just be doing a few lines and you can do that quite quickly. When you know you're settling in to do quite a long kind of session, um, I'll typically put on something in the background. There's always at least music when I'm working. That's really, really important because I think that helps with rhythms. And building a rhythm when you're doing that kind of work is really important to just keep it going and just keep making progress. But yeah, certainly you definitely build more of a connection with the work the longer
Mm-hmm.
you take it, especially when you're doing it by hand. You're just naturally using other parts of your brain than if you're doing everything on a computer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found just that physical act alone really builds a strong connection with the work. And I can usually tell, say if I have a podcast or maybe a TV show or a film on in the background, usually when I look back at a piece that I've made, I'm able to remember in a way what I was listening to, which is really strange. I could never do that with the other work.
Yeah.
But there's something about the cognition of doing stuff by hand that helps to build stronger senses of memory.
Mm.
So that's one interesting thing that I've noticed in doing it. Um, then sometimes you know yourself, your mind can go wherever. And you just start thinking about God knows what. But yeah, typically it does take a good bit of your concentration, so the mind is less likely to wander than when I did work through, say, Photoshop and digital applications.
Yeah. And I think it's when your hand touches something, there's a completely different experience, right? So it's kind of bringing it into a new sense and bringing it maybe back to photography the way, darkroom photography and, exposing the film and that kind of really tactile nature because it always was. And then, as you say, your process kind of went from, the screen on the back of the camera. When it moved away from film to this, to the upload to Instagram, and it was this kind of screen-based transition, I guess. But but now it's kind of you're interrupting that flow, taking it down and holding it, and even though the templates are created, or digitally, there's a manual nature to the work that brings it back to its original kind of, I suppose, purpose, which for me, photography was always about capturing a moment in time, and kind of like a time capsule of sorts, kind of like, this was here, this is the evidence of this moment in time, and in a way it's kind of, it's kind of the same, it's kind of, slowing things down and just kind of creating the kind of slowness and that kind of that pace to the work that is, I think, I suppose it gives you, as you say, it gives you more connection to it. And I suppose in a time now where everything is fast, 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 AI, and just churning things out, that really kind of, that slowness really kind of, I think, is what makes your work really stand out. There's a quiet calm to the work through the kind of structure, but it has this kind of sense of not nostalgia, but not quite far from nostalgia, even though it's completely new. Do you know what I mean? Like when you look at it,
Absolutely.
there's a
Yes.
familiarity to it,
Yeah.
which I love. I absolutely love.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that nostalgia that you touched upon, it's just it's something that's inherently linked to both photography and to embroidery. Because I think we just see embroidery as something that's from the past in a way. I mean, photography certainly. That's the main root reason why I got into it was because I just love nostalgia so much, and I love looking back and telling stories, and just
Mm,
memories, all of that. It's such a lovely thing. So I think there is this kind of marriage between the two that works in that sense. Time is so linked to both of those mediums, which is something I've been realizing more and more the last sort of couple of years. Like the more that I do it, the more I realize time and memory are so intertwined in both of them.
mhm. And I would say for your work as well, the kind of like emotion or atmosphere as well. Like there's, some of your work is kind of like, peaceful and hopeful, and you're kind of trying to show resilience and all of this kind of this language, and then there's this technical aspect to it as well. So there's kind of like this the technicality and the technical manipulation, and then this emotional register as well. How do you get those to kind of sit together as well as they do, the kind of highly
Um,
technical but quite emotive pieces.
well, thank you very much. It's very kind. Uh, that's what I'm going for. So that's nice to hear.
It's what I see when I see your work.
Good, good. Well, I suppose just in the concept phase, that's when you're, I suppose, drawing from the soul in some sense. Um, and I suppose that's when you're the most authentic, artistic kind of part of yourself, at least for me in my process. That's when you're coming up with the ideas and trying to figure out how it's all going to come together. But the concept is obviously the most sort of important part as far as putting a soul into a piece of work. So I think as long as you've kind of come up with something that you can stand on, that you think will work and has says something about you or the way you see the world, um, you do that, and then I just have to kind of turn the mind into the kind of more technical side of things. So you just have to kind of be able to go between both. Um, and yeah, so you have to be a little bit of a dreamer and all of that, but then also you have to be very savvy as far as how you're actually going to bring something to fruition and bring it into existence. So yeah, it takes a lot of practice and a lot of work as well. I know a lot of people might think being an artist is just this like sort of like lovely hippy dippy life, and can be in some ways, but obviously it's a lot of hard work as well. So it's finding the balance between those two things.
And then the concepts that you mentioned there, kind of planning out, sketching it out, like how married are you to the concept when you begin, and how much do you let it drift into whatever it becomes? Like, is there kind of like, no, it needs to look a certain way when you're like conceptualizing maybe the shoot before the embroidered piece?
I'd say the area where it's most likely to develop and change is when I have the photographs on the computer. So, like I said, I will sketch ideas out first, and I will do generally very loose. They're nothing terribly specific. I find that if I am too specific about an idea from the get go, and I'm not leaving any room for it to breathe or to move or to change, it never really turns out that well. It really finds itself through the process, and that's when it starts to take on a life of its own. So at some point through between sort of the sketching and the stitching, it's all that stuff in between then that I think takes it to where it needs to be, like as far as just a more interesting place than where it began. I think when the ideas start, that's one place for them to be and to live. But for me, they always grow and they always change and develop. But once I start to shoot them, edit those images, come up with the templates, but by the time it's printed, it needs to be realized, basically, because it's just the very nature of stitching through paper. There's not a lot of room for error. So you have to kind of be pretty well decided. I'll usually do a few small print tests to test out the scale of the stitch and to test out colors and make sure they're all working. Because if you don't do those things and you just sort of wing it and think, ah, this might work, and you're not too sure, but you just try it out anyway, you could spend days of work for a result that you know could have been better. And that's not work that I'm really going to put out. And there were more mistakes that I made early on. I kind of know not to do that anymore. But yeah, there's a lot of trial and error still. But I do like to come up with an idea, but still leave it open for some kind of interpretation. I mean, I might shoot a bunch of different, say, poses
Yeah.
of a subject, and then take them into Photoshop to adjust the tones or play with the colors. Which is, again, it's an area that I'm very, very comfortable with. And then just find, oh, this one that I just did kind of as a throwaway thing at the end is actually really interesting, and it takes it in a slightly different direction that I hadn't planned.
Hmm.
And that's when I usually find my most interesting work or my best work, I think. So I think you should always be open to those developments and not be
Hmm.
too strict from the beginning, because you're closing yourself off for the different pathways you might be able to take.
Yeah. And I suppose the medium that you're using, paper, is not really that forgiving when you start punching a load of holes in it. Where fabric, has a lot more kind of, I suppose, malleability in that respect. Yeah.
You can, if you really need to, you can undo stitches and things like that. You can do that with paper as well, but you have to be so careful. You have to be like a surgeon. It's really, really delicate. Again, there's also canvas. I don't just use paper, I use canvas as well. Like your piece there is canvas. That's a bit more forgiving because canvas is a fabric. It's not like, say, a cotton or linen or something like that. It's still, once you punch a hole in it, it won't seal back up, the way other fabrics will. It's there. And you want as few mistake holes as possible. Or none, hopefully.
And then you might tell us about the RTE project, the Illuminations project. How did that come about? That kind of happened during lockdown, right?
Yes, yeah, that was
Yeah. So how did
wild.
that come about? And tell us
Um,
about a little bit about that, and we'll have some images as well.
sure, sure. So that
Sounds
that came along at such a perfect time, because I just that first self-portrait that I mentioned I did with the kind of the kaleidoscopic kind of colorful floral embroidery around it. I had just done that, and then I got an email from RTE saying, we're looking to get artists on board for these commissions, and we're gonna, do this gallery, and we'll bring you in, and this is fantastic opportunity to help artists out during the lockdown. And I don't know how they found me. I asked them, but they just said your name was just on a list. Someone obviously suggested you at some point, but they just, that name had been lost. So I still to this day don't know how. You just never know. It really
yeah.
goes to show, like, you never know. All the people that you meet, you never know. They might just drop your name in a meeting one day, and then, you can get this great opportunity. So that's how it happened. I just got an email. I said, yeah, great, brilliant. They said, we're looking for people to really reflect on themes of resilience, so that it's not too, doom and gloom. Obviously, it was a very difficult time, and they were looking to support people, but also not, shy away from the realities of the difficulties at that time, but to show a bit more kind of like resilience. I was living in Stony Batter at the time and lived very close to the Phoenix Park. So that was my little haven away from it all, to get away from the noise of the news cycle, and just to get a little bit of a break from, remember at that time, like, we forget it so easily now, but at the time we were all terrified. We didn't know what was going on. Like, we were like, how long is this going to happen? Like, what does the future hold for us? What's going to happen to the world, to our families?
Hmm.
Um, so it was a really, really stressful time for everyone. But the Phoenix Park for me was just somewhere I could take my bike to and just forget about it for a little while and then come home. So I definitely wanted to use that as inspiration. And given that I had just found this new mixture of mediums that I really enjoyed, I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll do that. Which I thought was a little bit of a risk, since it was some new territory, and I was if I was known for anything, it was more digital manipulation work.
Mhm.
But I thought, no, I'm going to go for this because I think there's something to that tactile nature, and it was really because of the lockdown that I started doing it more because it's so time consuming. But I never would have had that time to explore it if my schedule had been what it typically is, which was a very busy schedule.
Mhm.
So the time of the lockdown allowed me to explore that. So I just thought it just makes the most sense to submit a piece that uses this and that is inspired by the Phoenix Park. And that is the first piece, which is a self portrait where I'm doing like one of these, and I've got like a leaf, and if you're kind of Art Nouveau, kind of Japanese style leaf. And I did that with a beautiful kind of green satin thread, which I'd never used before, which really like sprung out off the page, off that really matte black and white. I was really proud of it. I was like, oh no, this is good. I like this. You know, I thought there's something there. So anyway, I sent that off to them and I got an email back saying that they really, really liked it. And I mentioned in the email that I'd sent with the piece that, you know, thanks again for bringing me on board to do this commission. I really enjoyed making this. I'm going to make more. I just happened to say, I'm definitely going to make more of these. I'm going to turn this into a little series. I loved doing this so much. And it's just so I did say that because then they got back to me and they said, we like this so much that we'd like to commission you to do a little 5-part series. Instead of just the one image, now we want you to do 5. So I said, okay, brilliant, great.
Amazing. I
Something to
said
do with the
10. I
job,
said
you know?
10. I said 20.
It's great. Anything you want. But it was so lucky that that came along when it did because, as I said, I had the time to do it. I was able to dedicate every minute that I had to it. It was a really exciting time. Really well. Obviously, it was a really awful time as well, but it was just that was an exciting part of it and an exciting distraction from it all. So I was really able to just throw myself into it and make the pieces. I mainly did self portraits, but then I got a friend of mine, Mar, who is an incredible mover, dancer, just beautiful person. Um, and I was able to manage to get into a studio and shoot with them for a bit too. So, because I've done self portraits before. I'll continue to do them, but there is a limit with how many I want out there. I don't want it just to be all me. So I remember thinking I need somebody else in this series. It can't just be me. So Mark came in and they were fantastic. Um, so yeah, that all came together really nicely. Then a couple months on, I think that all happened around summertime. Then when it came up to the winter solstice, they had this idea where they wanted to take the project a little bit further, take some of the artist's work and then project them onto different kind of notable places. So because mine was inspired by the Phoenix Park, they asked if they could project my work onto the Wellington Monument, which was just like,
Okay.
I was like, I suppose. Like I remember when they rang me up and asked me if I would be okay with that. And I was so in the moment, I was so sort of shocked and obviously elated that I was almost afraid to answer just in case I accidentally said no or something. You know what I mean? I was just like, really? Um, and still to this day, they were doing kind of a test projection. Because the Wellington Monument, obviously the composition of it didn't match the composition of the work. The work I was doing was
Mm.
all kind of A sizes. The Wellington Monument obviously is very, very thin and tall, but they had gotten a great animator and technicians together where they had taken the work and they had kind of rejigged it and animated it so it was kind of moving together within that kind of composition really, really beautifully. And they asked me to come along for the kind of test projection the day before they were launching it. And I remember walking in the north gate of the Phoenix Park, and you can see it from there. It was pitch black at the time. And I look across and I just see my work lit up on the Wellington Monument. And it was so surreal. It was like something out of like a manga film or something like that. I don't know how else to explain it. It was just so, so strange.
Like the Dublin equivalent of Times Square, isn't it?
Yeah, it was like, especially during that time, it was just such
Yeah.
it was so incredible. Like, I remember leaving that whole shoot and, like, skipping on my way home. I was so happy.
Oh.
just skipping in the dark by myself, just like, "This is brilliant." And so, yeah, that was, I
I
mean,
actually remember seeing it online only because it wasn't within my 5K radius,
right, yeah,
and I
yeah,
saw pictures, yeah, and I remember thinking, "The world is still alive out there." Do you know what I
right.
mean?
Oh, that's lovely.
Because you're stuck in your own little bubble of your own people, and then all of the news stream kind of going on, and then your own 5K. And I just remember seeing it and going, "Oh, it lives on. There's creativity happening." It's fantastic to see that. At the time, it was so obviously seen that creativity was and is a great thing for people, for society, for us to kind of see that in our public spaces. Um, do you think that those types of opportunities are still there for visual artists?
That's a good question. I mean,
Mm.
they're hard to come by.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're out there, I think, but they're not roaring at you in the face. You have to seek them out.
Mm.
Um, that's something that I'm kind of getting to grips with more and more. The more I'm going from sort of a commercial editorial practice into fine art, which I would say I'm like fully into the fine art practice now, or visual arts practice. Um, yeah, it's like, it's a real transition to make that. But part of it is, I mean, working as an editorial or a commercial photographer, you're getting hired by agencies, companies, publication, doing the work, getting paid. But as an artist, it's just obviously it's not the same kind of
Mhm.
thing.
Mm.
So you have to look for funding opportunities, open calls, residencies. It's a different kind of world, different checklist that you need to be looking at. So yeah, there are still opportunities there, but there always feels like there could be more. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
um, like that was such an incredible opportunity
Mhm.
during lockdown. But I haven't met one just quite like it since then.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they are out there. But yeah, we could always use more.
Here's a call to our national broadcaster to kind of do something again. But because it kind of begs the question, why are we, only doing these in times of like, crisis? Like, why can't we actually, look at more opportunities for visual artists in the public realm, and it's funny because one of the podcasts spoke to Sarah Bracken Soper, and she was saying kind of same thing. She has, you know, she's constantly applying for different kinds of grants and opportunities for her work. She said she had applied for something like 14 funding calls, and she was kind of, only getting towards three. She was rejected for the rest, and she was on a second panel for three. And, so the funnel is quite tight as well. And those opportunities are difficult to come by. And I suppose you have the safety net of maybe returning to commercial work and doing some editorial work should the need arise. But I get from you that you're saying now your practice is fully in the visual arts space, so you're kind of really kind of pursuing growth in that area. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think so.
Mm.
Like it's a decision that was not made easily, and that's not to say, if a commercial job came calling and I thought it really fit my values and all of that, that I would say absolutely not or anything. Like that door is never fully closed. But I
Mm-hmm.
think to kind of reach the full potential that you may want to reach in a particular practice or area, you just have to dedicate yourself fully to it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so that's what I'm doing. But yeah, certainly I can empathize with what Sarah's going through with applications and grants and funding and all of that. It is tough. It is really, really competitive. And coming from a non-fine art background, I think is sort of tricky as well. Um, Writing is a whole other avenue and skill that you have to learn if you want to be successful in those areas.
Mm.
So I actually did a writing course recently in with the RHA with Aidan Kelly Murphy. It was a 2-day workshop, got a master class in how to write your bio, your artist statement, apply for funding, and it was like phenomenally helpful. It
Mm-hmm.
was like the best money I've spent in a long time. It really, really was fantastic. It was really useful. Um, but yeah, that gave me a basis at least to work from, because before then I really had no idea where to start, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and as I said, it's a whole other skill. So yeah, I think if you're going into the fine art world, it's something you have to be prepared for. Takes practice, takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of just tough skin because there's a lot of rejections. So
Yeah.
that's just the way it is. But like when I started applying for funding, I think I started to apply about 5 years ago, 5 or 6, and again at the time kind of thought like, oh, this should be fine. You know, I've been kind of knocking around a bit. Like maybe it'll be, you know, yeah, it should be all right. You know, and then it was like, just no, 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 no. And I was like, oh, geez. Oh, okay, 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 I get it. But you just have to keep going, you know?
Yeah.
You can't let it get you down. And you can't take it
Hmm.
personally either.
Mm.
Something that I don't, because at the end of the day, I think a little bit through, and you might share this with me, given that we both worked together in teaching, it's sort of the same when you're grading a paper. You know, you might have a stack to get through, and you need to get through them. And you know, there's nothing else coming into your adjudication other than the work that's in front of you, and that's it. You know, it's
Yeah.
not about the person or anything like that, nor
Hmm.
should it ever be.
Yeah.
But yeah, a few more opportunities, a bit more funding would be great.
Yeah.
More is always welcome.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
But it's interesting that you don't really know how you got the RTE,
yeah,
nod essentially. You don't know where your name was thrown into some mix at some point. But it was ultimately from self-promotion, so maybe, having that first initial piece on Instagram, someone saw it and then your name was thrown into a mix or whatever,
yeah.
however it happened. But it's increasingly becoming with all creatives that they need to not only be good at the subject matter or the area where they're working, but they need to be almost like entrepreneurial. They need to be an influencer, dare I say that word, but you know what I mean? They need to be a promoter, a marketer, a performer, to camera, which really doesn't kind of come naturally to most kind of creatives who like to like sit behind the work and just get it done. And I feared all of that kind of hoopla, if you'd like to call it, is what gets people the big likes and the kind of lots of followers. But actually, it's the people that don't have that. They don't have that specter of social media followers. They're the ones doing the really, really good work, and maybe some of them, their practices are getting kind of drowned out, or it's more difficult for them to
Hmm.
kind of break through, particularly on platforms like Instagram. What are your thoughts on that kind of whole self-promotion kind of piece?
I'm kind of over it in a way.
Yeah.
Oh, Instagram and all that. It's so rotten. A person that I'm friendly with, they're an artist. They live in Munich. Who I kind of found them through. They did self portrait work as well. A couple of years back, I found them. Sebastian. They were doing a little kind of live of, oh, I'm working, you know, hop on. And I didn't never really done that, so I hopped on and just was like, just in the comments, go hello. And they were saying, you know, it's, oh my God, I haven't seen you in ages, or, you know, because we used to comment a bit more. And like back when there felt like there was a bit more of a community aspect, you know, you would actually get to know people like that. And again, I've never met this person in the flesh, but I do feel like, you know, they're a little bit of an acquaintance or a buddy within creativity in the world, and we've supported each other a little bit online and that. And they were saying on their live, like, oh, it's so good to see you. You know, isn't it crazy like how different things are on Instagram now? It feels like it's just algorithms. And back when we first started seeing each other's work, it felt like there was a bit more of a community aspect to it. But like
Mhm.
any semblance of a community aspect is long gone in my
Yeah.
eyes. Like
Yeah.
it's not there anymore. It's just a money making machine. And I know it kind of, it needs to be done, but I'm definitely not feeling the pressure to post there as much as I used to. So
Mhm.
anyone that maybe has followed me for a while there might notice that over the while. Partially that's because the work that I do now, there's no way you could be posting it every day. Like my hands don't work that fast. It's just not it. Like I remember when I started doing it, I kind of did try to keep up with my regular kind of posting schedule, which would have been probably every other day. But there was just there's no way. Absolutely no way.
Mhm.
And then I started to realize, well, there's not really, I don't see the point in it. Like, I'd rather take my time and just curate a piece and be really happy with it and put out one every couple of weeks or every couple of months and do it that way. Just not worry about it so much anymore. Like I used to worry about the likes and the followers and all that.
Mhm.
But I found, at least in the kind of area of the creative industry that I found myself in now, it seems to me that followings and likes and things like that isn't really as important. I think what's more important is what's on your CV. At least that's how it seems to be. And I know it's going to be different in like commercial sectors and things like that, but it seems to me in fine art, the people who've been successful in, say, um, getting successful grant applications and things like that, like, because I have to do my research and see who's getting what kind of work is being awarded to different people. A lot of them don't have massive followings, but they're doing really, really well and are really successful artists. So in a way, just kind of seeing that and realizing that took the pressure off for me. And I thought, yeah, you know what? They don't have to do it all the time and, feed the beast every single day, and they're doing great. So maybe we don't all have to do it. But I understand that there is a pressure to do it, of course. It's tough. But I've kind of let go of it now at this stage.
And I think it's just like it's an echo chamber all of its own, isn't it? You post something nice, everyone, a piece of work, you get a load of people that like your work saying that's great and putting fire emojis under your work. Like, what's the point? You know, it's kind of
And
yeah,
and
it's not
that's
really.
that can be very nice, and it's lovely to, get that as well. But yeah, I think the main thing I'm using Instagram for now is I'm just posting pictures of my cat and my stories. That's about it. It's like better than anything else anyway.
So we come full circle, and that's what the internet was invented for, wasn't it?
Exactly,
Sharing
that's
cat
what it's
memes.
for.
We're back there.
Have you seen any of my cat pictures? Have you seen this guy?
I
I
have, yes.
mean, he's amazing. He's amazing. I wish he was
Definitely.
around right now and I could get him in, but I think he's like shading under a tree somewhere right now, trying to keep cool.
We'll add a picture into the pod. We'll pop it.
Yeah, yeah, I've got
Yeah.
so many.
Has to be done. But then I suppose in terms of feeding the beast that we dare not name, the AI beast, what are your thoughts on, and not to turn this into another conversation about AI because I just can't abide that, but what are your thoughts on AI in terms of photography and the use of AI generated imagery?
I mean, it's probably no surprise that I'm not a fan. Um,
Mm,
I just don't think it looks very nice. I don't think it has a soul. I think it's just, you know, copying the work of other people, actual people, um, which feels really gross and sneaky and kind of intrusive.
yeah.
Um, and I also don't like that a lot of it is just trying to trick people into thinking it's a real photograph.
Yeah.
It's not coming across as genuine. Like I know some AI art now, and again, some of it's very obvious that it's AI art, but it's not to everybody.
Hmm.
It's, some of it is labeled as AI art, but a lot of it
Hmm.
isn't.
Mm,
You can kind of, and I've been caught out with it a couple of times myself,
hmm.
where it takes me a second, then I go, oh wait a minute, no, that hand's a bit funny or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
No, if you're trying to kind of sneakily get this in and try to pass it off as something it isn't, it just doesn't feel good. So yeah, I don't like it.
I know. I kind of wonder, like, if you use AI to write for you, you're kind of dulling your ability to write, right? The inherent skill with, articulating sentences, putting the thoughts together, contrasting arguments. You're kind of dulling all of those senses by letting AI do the writing for you. Likewise with creative pursuits, I don't think AI is there yet in terms of making any kind of comparison to a professional piece of design work, but it's kind of almost dulling down people's taste. Do you know what I mean? Like, so you'd look at artwork, you'd look at any type of visual arts, photography, any type of creative work, and you'd start to kind of have an opinion based on maybe having seen something else, comparing, contrasting in your mind, and kind of saying, I like how this is this, but maybe it should be a little bit more that, or, so this kind of critique that you kind of internal dialogue you had in your head, which kind of told you, which kind of happens quite quickly, but tells you whether or not you just even like something, or, you kind of, understand it. I think that piece, that ability, that discernment is being dulled by AI in a number of different ways across all our creative pursuits, from writing to listening. There's lots of AI music, and straight into the kind of arts and creative space too. Like, I think ultimately, your ability to like put things together, and your taste is going to become so, so important. And I think it's a bit of a tragedy to be allowing that to, move into the kind of AI generated world, because like the whole point of making is the process, like all of the steps and all of those considerations, those really kind of tiny considerations that you're making when you're kind of getting someone to pose in the initial stages, or taking a variety of different shots, and then you're kind of considering different angles, and and then your templates and all that consideration slowly over time moves the work into what it becomes. And without all of those moments of human kind of interaction, the work is never going to get there. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah,
Yeah,
like,
it certainly seems that way. I mean, like you
yeah,
said, the process is really such an integral part, obviously. But at the end of the day, any kind of creative work, it's it's made by a human, so therefore it is made with a soul in it. And the machines just don't have souls. Not yet. So I think, yeah, AI for me, it seems as if it can only ever be some kind of a generic, homogenized version of everything that's already come before.
yeah. And I think that kind of, the photographic truth, and what we said at the start with it being the time capsule, you're right, it's disingenuous, isn't it? It's not a moment in time. Like, if it's going to be a drawing, be a drawing, that kind of way, being a photo, like trying to be a photograph of a moment in time that never existed to begin with, is so disingenuous,
So
you
bizarre.
know.
So strange. Yeah, it is. It's very strange, especially when they're trying to, you see like these ads where they're trying to pull at the heartstrings in some way. And it might not just be a photograph, it might be like a video. Like, what are you doing? It's so rank. It's like, what are you trying to do here? Like, this is
Yeah.
no, it's just it feels quite low when they really try to put the heartstrings in that.
Yeah, 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 definitely. So do you want to talk about maybe one project particularly, and maybe to step us through the stages of that project from the beginning to the end?
So as far as projects go, the work that I've been producing in the last couple of years, it's generally not so much series based. It's usually individual images. Some of those images, obviously, similar themes are brought forth. So there's probably, different kind of groups and sets of images, but none of them are intentionally made into series works. That is something that I'm working on developing now. So Halfway to Nowhere is an extension of a theme that I've been working on to do with the housing crisis in Ireland. So I was lucky enough to get a house about 2 years ago, um, in Kildare. And then
Congratulations.
thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. Not an easy thing to do. And, like most people, I was renting for many, many years beforehand and felt like the idea of getting a house was just kind of an impossible task. But, I had a lot of friends give us good advice and we worked very hard. We saved up and we got lucky, which seems to be how people get houses these days. There has to be some luck involved. But through the process of trying to find one, I was just continuously disappointed with how difficult the system is, and how difficult it is, particularly for people that work in freelance capacity, or perhaps people that are maybe trying to do it as a single person. Um, I'm a freelance person, but I had a partner at least to help, which makes a big difference. But if you're a single person, you're still entitled to a house, especially you might be very hardworking, single person, you should be allowed to have your own space. It's, I think it's something that everybody is entitled to. And when we did finally get our house and move in and settle into having our own space for the first time, uh, like it was just so much better than I could have ever imagined. And it kind of, it annoyed me in a way as well, because I thought this is like something that everyone should have access to. It shouldn't be this almost impossible thing to reach for us. And it's an avoidable issue, but you know, it's just it's not being dealt with correctly. So I had made work surrounding the state of the housing crisis, and then after we moved out here, as much as I absolutely love my house, as I've said, I love living here. I'm so lucky to have a house. I love having my own space. I love having this is a room in my house that I used to work in, which is fantastic. That I have a dedicated workspace now. Um, but I still was a little bit annoyed that I had to move out of Dublin, because I didn't want to move out of Dublin. You know, that's where I grew up. That's where all my family and friends are. That's where, if I do need to go into work somewhere, that's where it tends to be. And, you know, I was a bit resentful that I was kind of forced out of it. So Halfway to Nowhere is basically about that. It's sort of a surrealist take on, you know, that whole Irish adage of you just have to, you know, the government says you just have to roll up your sleeves and go to work and work hard and, you know, don't have any avocado toast and you'll be able to get a house too. But um, the only way that was possible for me was by moving out of my home in a way. Now, again, very, very grateful to have the house I'm in. I'm not that far from Dublin, so it's not the end of the world or anything, but, you know, I still just don't think it was it's not how I imagined things would go, I suppose. So that's what this piece is about. And I wanted to do something reflecting my frustrations with that. Um, and as well as that, I wanted to do some work that was a bit more locational. So a lot of the work I had done prior to this was typically in very minimal kind of spaces. It may have been just like a blank wall, for instance, or a black color, or you know, something a little tighter in. I noticed that after I looked at sort of my portfolio at the time, there was very little locational work. So I really wanted to bring in something a little bit more grand. And I had this picture taken from Kerry that I'd taken prior to making this image. And so the secret, I suppose, if you like, behind this image is that it's not one entire photograph, it's two. So the background is one image, and then the wall that I'm sitting on, which is me, is taken out my back garden here in Selbridge. So it's pieced together kind of in a collage way. I think that helps add to the kind of surrealist quality to it, because typically with photography, if you have that level of distance in a shot, something will be out of focus. But in this image, everything is sharp all the way through. And so that was done because it's two separate images put together. And that's what helps with that kind of level of clarity, which I think brings maybe a little bit more of a painterly aspect to it as well, which I really enjoyed that kind of result. So the way I made this was I built that main house that's over the head with the yellow facade and that sort of navy roof. I made that out of cardboard and sat on my back wall with the tripod, positioned the shovel, and just tried to balance it on my head and get the right pose. Because I kind of, like I know I said with other images, I kind of leave the door open for different avenues. With this, I was pretty sure I wanted a pose where I was sitting on the wall, I was rolling up a sleeve, and that was basically it. So took a while to get that. Usually when you're shooting self-portraits with your camera on a tripod on a timer, that can, you know, it takes a long time to get it right, especially if you're trying to balance like a cardboard box on your head and get the light right and everything else. And like I can only imagine what the neighbors were thinking, you know, like I'd only just moved into the house pretty much and they're like, oh, was that? You know. But oh well. Um they're used to it now. I'm sure they're very nice. But yeah, that got shot. And then at the time, I wasn't sure what the background was going to be. I knew I was going to replace the background because in reality, that wall just has another wall behind it. We have like a double wall in our back garden. So obviously there was some land dispute at some point, and somebody put up a wall, and somebody was supposed to take down a wall and they didn't. Anyway, made use of it. So I cut out the extra wall that's kind of behind that short wall and just had a blank space. And I played around a bit with what kind of backdrop to put in. Initially, I'd put in this kind of an abstract kind of, it was like a macro shot of little pieces of white, kind of sparkle material and water, and it was all kind of snowy and very surreal like. And it made the image a lot more kind of dreamy, which I thought was an interesting effect, but it just wasn't quite what I wanted. And then I thought a landscape would be great. Again, that locational kind of aspect kept coming back to me. I don't shoot a lot of landscapes, but then I went back. I'd taken a trip to Kerry with my partner and his family, and I'd found that image and thought, oh, that's perfect. It brings the whole idea together. It brings it full circle, and it brings that kind of aspect of, moving to the middle of nowhere, which is what a lot of people have to do. And that sense of isolation and space, and also that very Irish kind of sensibility. So once I put that in the back, I was like, fantastic. That works really, really nicely. Um, so I did that. And then the other thing that changed in the layout was the extra two houses on either side. I'd been researching the kind of the color use in Irish streets in rural areas. A lot of them use a lot of colorful kind of paint on different aspects of the house, whether it's the door, the window ledge, whatever. I couldn't quite decide on one, and I thought it would be great to add a little bit more variety in color and reference those kinds of color choices that people make in kind of traditional Irish areas. So I thought having more of like a little street would be kind of interesting to add another aspect on top of that. And then I think the last change I made before I printed it was just to have the two houses on the side start to sort of collapse and kind of start to fall apart. Something about that kind of unsteady kind of aspect, I think, again, just fed into the narrative that I was trying to show a little bit more. So, little by little, you can kind of find ways to add to whatever story you're trying to tell through different phases of the work. And then, of course, the last phase is you print it. This was printed fairly large onto canvas, then it was stretched, and then it was stitched into over a period of about a week, I'd say.
Those types of pieces that you do that have quite a like a big message, really. Um, where do you envisage that they're going to kind of go? Do you know what I mean? When you're making them, is it that you're trying to make a statement and then you're maybe going to put it into an exhibition of some sort, or is there a thought about how the viewer will get to see this work?
Yeah, so that one was made specifically for an exhibition. That was there's a show called The Art Riddler, which, have you heard of The Art Riddler, Danielle?
I have, yes, I
Yes.
was
Yeah.
there this year.
Yeah, you were there, you were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so The Art Riddler is a serious art lover who a couple of years ago started putting on a big art competition where you enter a work, and if it gets through, he puts on an exhibition with your work where you can get 100% of any sales that you might make,
Mhm.
and goes on over a weekend. Usually it's grown from, I think the first one had maybe 40 artists involved. It was in the first one I've been in each year, luckily. And then the most recent one had like over 100 artists. So this image that I made halfway to nowhere was for last year's show. And I think a show like that, the big part of the Art Riddler show, I suppose the big draw is that one person gets 100,000 euro. That's like a big prize that one person gets. So that's a good bit of motivation to be a part of a show like that, to potentially win the chance to win something like that. But also if you make something that feels true to you and that other people connect with, then hopefully you sell your work. And it's very unusual that you will keep 100% of the sale, which in the art show you do. So it's just a good motivator to try and push yourself. And I find that each year I try to do something a little bit kind of bigger and better in some sense. So I knew that that's where that piece would hopefully end up. And look, it did, and it sold and went down well. So
And you had two pieces in this year's Art Riddler. didn't
Yes,
you?
I did. I had
Yeah.
2 pieces. Yeah, it came around a little bit, quicker this year. Usually it's in sort of October, November. So it was funny, we were all there in, like, our summer clothes, which was really strange. We're all usually, like, in our coats and stuff. But, yeah, it was really, really nice. But, I had 2 pieces in this year. One was to do well, they're both kind of a little bit separately to do with the series that I'm working on at the moment. So I'm starting to take my kind of stitch work and my conceptual work in a little bit of a different direction, whereas typically it would be quite representational, the motifs that I would stitch into the work. I'm now taking it in a bit of a direction where it's being used more so like a code, um, where it's representing kind of pieces of time, measurements of time or emotion and things like that. It's all connected to time and memory, and a little bit about what we spoke earlier about how photography and embroidery are inherently linked to time and memory. That's something that kept coming back to me. So I've decided to kind of explore that basic idea a little bit further. Because I think that's just what lies at the root of everything that I've been doing. Um, so that was one piece that was called Recollection Data. Almost forget the name of my own piece. Yeah, that's not great. It's the heat. It's the heat. I can't help it.
It must be said that it's a spectacularly hot day in Dublin here. We never really have
Dramatic.
heat that's touching the 30 degrees now at this point, so
Telling you, yeah. Well, we can't have our fans on because of the sound. We're dedicated podcasters. So,
But
yeah,
I saw your work there, and I did feel like it's definitely feels like a new departure, and you know you're a new visual language almost that you're kind of moving towards with the two pieces that you had in the Art Riddler show. It was really interesting to see your work kind of still produce something fresh and different, but all of a sudden have almost a different voice to it. But it really reminded me when you were talking at the start of this podcast, the structure and the calm. There's a calmness to, you know, the piece with the little crosses. That one, that particular piece, there's such a calmness to that when you're looking at it. Yeah, but it's fabulous, fabulous new work. So what's next for Hazel Coonagh? Is there an exhibition or anything, or is there? I think you got some funding. Is that right, or
I
an award? Yeah.
did. Finally successful. Never give up. Yeah, so after many years of failed funding applications, I finally was successful with one. I recently was awarded the Arts Act grant from Kildare Arts Council, as well as their executive coaching grant, which I just started yesterday, which was fantastic. So that's going to be funding a new project, which is going to be taking on some of that new visual language that I've been developing, exploring that in full and making more kind of series based works. That's something that I really want to challenge myself to do. Um, and then the other thing that I have coming up is an exhibition in November that's going to be curated by Ishmael Claxton called Alternative Methods. And that's going to be myself and 3 other female artists. Details are to be released close to the time, but that's something that we've been working towards. So we've each of us have been doing studio visits to each other's respective workspaces. So I had the other artists and Ishmael over to my little studio space here in Celbridge last month, which was really, really nice. Um, so yeah, we'll be working on that. That will be coming out soon. And then the other project for Kildare Arts Council as well.
Amazing. And the final question for me, and I'll let you go and enjoy the sunshine. So this podcast, as you know, is called Rough Drafts, and I'm just wondering, is there any kind of rough draft in your practice? Is there anything that you'd love to try? Something maybe it's a client, maybe it's a piece of work, maybe it's a type of work or a way of working. Is there anything that you can mention, of course, that you'd love to kind of maybe explore a little bit further?
God, there's so many things, so many. I've always wanted to make a music video.
Amazing.
Always loved music videos. Um, Back in the day, MTV used to have this thing of like the making of music videos. Do you remember
Mhm.
that? I was just
I
obsessed,
do. I loved it.
obsessed
Yeah.
with that. I've seen the behind the scenes and all that. Um, so I've done, I mean, very kind of experimental music videos for a band called CFit many years back now at this stage. which was all kind of close-up shots of coloured paint moving around and forming very abstract. Really fun to make, but I would love to do something a little more ambitious. Music is my first love, and if I get into listening to a song that resonates with me or is just catchy or whatever it is, like I usually just can't help but have some kind of visual or narrative happen in my mind. So I would love to explore that at some stage, should the right opportunity arise.
Let's take a look at a clip.
So that's definitely up there. And I want to start doing woodwork. I want to make books. I want there's so many things. There's so many things. There's, as I said earlier, it's being creative, and if you want to tackle an art form or something, it's just never been as accessible as it is right now. If there's something you want to try, there is a YouTube tutorial that exists for it. And you can figure it out through trial and error. Worst that can happen is you fail and you don't tell anybody. It's fine. Like, or you fail, you learn something, you try again, and you improve, and that's like the best feeling in the world, because adding more skills to your inventory it's one of my favorite things to do if you can manage it.
Mhm.
It just, I don't know, makes life better. I just love making things and finding new ways to make new things and learning new skills. It's just my favorite thing in the world.
Great. Thank you so much, Hazel. It's been wonderful. I want to wish you the very best of luck with the Arts Award and the new
Thank you.
visual language development,
Thank you very much.
and the video for your of your new music video that you're going to create.
Yes.
But it's been a joy, and your work is beautiful. If ever you get a chance to go see the work in real life, it's just stunning. So please make sure you do get to her exhibition. All the details we'll link into this episode for the was it November, you said? November exhibition?
Remember, yes.
Yeah,
Thanks so
yeah,
much.
yeah. We'll do that. But thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
If you liked that episode, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can also watch the videos over on Spotify and YouTube, and go to our Patreon channel to see more podcasts, live content and case studies. Just search Bounce Creative.